Welcome to Commander Pop Culture, a place to gather magical information with some laughs, might I add. Hello everyone, welcome to day 4 of Murders at Karlov Manor spoilers. Let's get started. First we got Ansrag the Quake Mole. It's a mole god.
I am always beneath you, but nothing is beneath me!
When it becomes blocked, untap each creature you control. After this phase, there's an additional combat phase. And then for double red, double green, and 3 colorless, Ansrag must be blocked each combat this turn if able. That's interesting. You basically force people to block it until it dies. Because you go into combat and then it gets blocked, you reset everything, go again. This card seems really cool, especially if you could get indestructible on it. You just go infinite amount of times, so you put some evasion like trample on it. This guy seems super strong. It's a unique activation. You might be able to finish people off depending on how smart your opponents are, because the strategy is you just dump everything into blocking this. That way you end the cycle. Extra combats will stop because there'll be nothing left to block it. So at the very least, you are forcing everybody to trade away their boards, and if they're smart, they trade it all in one setting. Say you're in a game of Commander. If everyone follows those rules, you'll at max get 4 combats the turn you go off with this. Maybe that's enough to win the game, I don't know. He's a cool guy to talk about though, so let me know in the comments what you think about my thoughts on that. Lazov, Wearer of Faces. Tax exile a card from the graveyard, then investigate. Whenever you sack a clue, you may have Lazov become a copy of a creature exiled with it until end of turn. Every time they make Lazov, I feel like it's a lukewarm kind of temperature. The first Lazov was awesome, and then every subsequent version we got of him, it's just been like, all right, I've had my fill. This is in the latter portion of
Who cares?
It's cute, like you get to exile something and then you make it a copy of something for a turn. The idea is you have a cheap body into play and you get it cranking right from the beginning. At least it gets you card advantage in the form of clues. So at least it's doing something other than just RNGing a graveyard card and then that's it. You at least get to see another card from the top of your library. Not too bad. When I say RNG, but it's a very light RNG. RNG in that you need a creature in a graveyard that's worth targeting. I guess you're at the whims of the board because he doesn't have great stats and he takes on the stats of the thing that you copy. Hopefully people can't effectively block you. Otherwise you just sit around doing nothing anyways. Ooh, this is a new, you could have any number of these in your deck kind of cards. We haven't had a green one yet, so that's kind of exciting. We've got Dragons Approach in red, we have Shadowborn Apostles, a Red Letless Rats, and the other rat in black. That's 3 cards in just black. And then we have Persistent Petitioners in blue, and now we have this, Slime Against Humanity. You get to create a 0/0 ooze, put X +1/+1 counters on it, where X is 2 plus the total number of cards you own in exile and in your graveyard that are oozes or are cards named Slime Against Humanity. Interesting that it cares about in exile too. Most oozes, I guess, eat things and they go to exile. Very cool card. Barbed Servitor. Indestructible 1/1 for 4 mana. When it enters the battlefield, you suspect it, so it gains menace, you can't block. When it deals damage to a player, you draw a card and lose a life. Whenever it is dealt damage, your opponent loses that much life. Oh, this is kind of like the Stuffy Doll effects, only you can't just let it sit around and block. You have to attack with this thing, because it can't block itself. I don't see why opponents wouldn't just let you hit them so that you could just draw a card. Although, the way you make it a hard decision is if you're able to pump its stats up. You have to make your opponents think twice about letting it hit you. So if you somehow grow the stats in a significant manner, is it more dangerous for this thing to hit me, or is it not as bad if I trade my creature off to this, have it deal damage, and then this thing still does damage to a target opponent? So I think that's the interesting parts of this card. The art's cool too. I like that it has Rakdos's like emblem as a burning face, and then it's just like an effigy, and it's serving a little libation. Archdruid's Charm. Triple green, search your library for a creature or land card, put it onto the battlefield tapped if it's a land, otherwise put it in your hand. Has some fairness to it. Put a +1/+1 counter on target creature controlled, then it deals damage. You yield this power to target creature you don't control. Exile target artifact or enchantment. It's not as good as the blue one. It has some unique qualities about it. Like, I like that it's an instant. I think that's where this card shines the most. and it's got some nice flex in being a removable piece. Blood Splatter Analysis. Enters the battlefield, deals 3 damage to target creature and opponent controls. Whenever one or more creatures die, mill a card and put a bloodstain counter on this. Then sack it if it has 5 or more. When you do, return target creature card from your graveyard to your hand. Well, I like how cheap it is for 2 mana. It's not a bad deal. It's removal. After a few turns, getting to the sacrifice clause isn't that hard, especially in EDH. Even in like a 60 card format like standard, I think you'll appreciate this. It might be sorcery speed, but you're still keeps giving you value down the road. I think it might see play in like control decks just because they kill things all the time and they play very few threats. And this enables you to get your threat back should you lose it. Ooh, pick your poison for 1 green sorcery speed. You choose one. Each opponent stacks an artifact, each opponent stacks an enchantment, each opponent stacks a creature with flying. I wish it was instant speed, but the 1 mana and you can hit anything with this is pretty sweet. I don't know if he'll see as much play as like Nature's Claim, but I think it's still quite good for all the things that it hits. And it gets around like indestructible stuff, so you can make people sacrifice their god commanders.
He like you.
We need more pieces to answer indestructibility from the command zone, and this is a nice pick your poison kind of a card. Ooh, Aftermath Analyst. Enters the battlefield, mill 3. Has a 4 mana sack it to return all lands from your graveyard to the battlefield tapped. This is a pretty sick card. I love Splendid Reclamation. That's basically what this is on a 2 mana body. I think this is going to be played a lot in Commander. It's a pretty kick-ass card if you ask me. Probably one of the best uncommons I've seen so far. Kylox's Penetrator. I have no idea. It's a motorcycle with legs. I don't know how to pronounce it. Spanung Trader. I think I pronounced it right actually the first try. Oh, it's a German. No wonder why I couldn't pronounce it. Maybe Spanung Trader means motorcycle in German. I have no idea. Collect Evidence 6 becomes an artifact creature till end of turn. Whenever it attacks, you can cast an instant or sorcery spell among cards exiled with it. If the spell would be put in your graveyard, put it all at the bottom of the owner's library instead. That has Crew 2. The Crew 2 seems a lot easier than Collect Evidence 6, but if needed to, that option's always there. So I guess that's nice. It's just Evidence 6 seems like a lot. And then the attack trigger is kind of nice. Instead of losing it permanently, you get to put the spell you cast from this on the bottom of your library. Every time I see someone that puts something on the bottom of the library now, I think of the Is It Commander that came out in the Doctor Who set, the one that lets you draw from the bottom of your deck. This is a nice fit in that deck for sure. And then you get the instant sorcery back, cast it, goes to your graveyard, and then you can collect evidence again to exile that spell and just redo that loop over and over again. So that's the part where the Evidence 6 actually plays a role, because the instants and sorceries you could choose from are from the exile pile that you make from the Evidence 6. Interesting. I like this design a lot, actually. This card's really sick. How much did it cost? 3 mana? Yeah, this seems really fun. If you like that Doctor Who commander I was talking about, I would just auto-include this. The only thing that's like weird, drawing from the bottom of your deck in an actual like paper game could be quite cumbersome. Maybe that's annoying. Maybe that's why people don't play it, but I've always had an interest in it because manipulating the bottom card of your library is really easy to do. I kind of want to try out that Doctor Who commander now just for this.
But I am back curious.
Prophet Edictic Memory. Enters the battlefield, draw, has no max hand size. At the beginning of combat on your turn, if you've drawn more than one card this turn, put X+1/+1 counters on target creature you control, where X is the number of cards you've drawn this turn -1. So you have to draw unnaturally for the bottom ability to start kicking in. I like that it cantrips off of itself. I love cheap artifacts or enchantments that cantrip off themselves. I'm going to put it in my Brago deck for sure. See if I can break this a little bit. Cool card. I also like that it's legendary. You don't see cheap legendary stuff in general. They're slowly developing the card pool of legendary cheap stuff that you could play, and this is a nice fit in those historic decks. Relive the Past. It's 7 mana. Return up to 1 target artifact, 1 target land, and 1 target non-aura enchantment card from your graveyard to the battlefield. They are 5/5 elementals. Oh, so you put 15 power into play and you rebuild 3 permanent types? That's pretty interesting. I imagine you just hit a fetch land and two very scary artifact slash enchantment from your graveyard that people got rid of. The 7 mana is quite stiff, but you are putting 15 power into play. I imagine you'll get close to 7 mana in CMC value. I think this is a pretty decent deal. 4 mana chalk it out line. It's a green enchantment, and what happens is whenever one or more creature cards leave your graveyard, create a blue-white 2/2 detective token and then investigate. I feel like you could break this in certain decks. People love cards like Desecrated Tomb and you make bats whenever a creature leaves, or Tormod and you make a zombie, the inverse. This is just another piece for those decks. Like, I'm building Izoni, the center of the web, and I play those 2 cards already. This will be a nice addition. Plus, I like it for Izoni because it makes a token as well. So you're making 2 tokens every time you move something from your graveyard. This card works really good in those decks. I might have to throw this in my build, which I actually build for all of you. I'm going to feature that on the channel here very soon. I'll have to keep this card in mind when I revisit and make that adjustment. Case of the Locked Hothouse. 4 mana. It's a case card. You may play additional lands this turn. You solve it once you have 7 more lands. And then once solved, you may look at the top card of your library anytime, and you may play lands, creatures, and enchantment spells from the top of your library. This has been like the flavor of green, where you could play lands or creatures, but this is the first time they've introduced a card that lets you play enchantments off the top of your library. I'd play this in Enchantress because you naturally get to those 7 lands quite easily. Because you're cantripping off of your enchantments with Enchantresses, you'll always have lands in hand, so they end up like shoehorning a light land strategy, and they'll put things like Burgeoning and Exploration, and they'll just outramp everyone at the table and outdraw everyone. Now extends to the top of your library because this lets you play more enchantments from the top. If you love playing Enchantress, then this will be a nice card for those folks. Fugitive Codebreaker. 2 mana, prowess and haste, has a disguise for 6. Holy cow. But the cost gets reduced per instant sorcery in your graveyard. And then when it's turn face up, discard your hand, draw 3. It's very similar to Bedlam Reveler. You're paying the 3 on the front end to put it face down, and then you get the cost reduction like Bedlam Reveler for instants and sorceries, and then you get the ETB trigger only. Now it's a flip trigger. I love Bedlam Reveler. Getting that cost reduction is really easy. It's, I mean, no different here. It's not as efficient as Bedlam Reveler, because when I played Bedlam Reveler, I always cast it for 2 mana pretty consistently. This, you'll be paying a minimum of 4. You know, the 3 that face down, the 1 red to flip it up. I'll do it anyways because
I want to see those cards.
You'll appreciate stuff like this. Doppel Gang. Triple X and blue-green. Holy cow. For each of X target permanents, create X tokens that are copies of that permanent. This seems like a very expensive card. If you want to copy 2 things, you'll have to pay 8 mana. That's pretty stiff. If it's just 1, then you're paying 5 for a copy token. I guess it has flex. You're in Simic colors, so having absurd amounts of mana is not uncommon. You'll probably find an opportunity to dump a ton of mana into this at some point if you don't want to pay the minimum of 5. Okay, that brings us to the end of today's spoiler video. Like I said, I did construct Izoni and I constructed Boja. Expect those over the weekend. Give you something to watch while we wait till next Monday, where I'll pick up on the spoilers. If you liked what you saw, subscribe. I love doing this. I love talking about the new Magic cards, and I like being up to date. It's a good reason to be current with cards. From what I'm gathering on Reddit, people are a little upset because a lot of the cards remind them of New Capenna. I can see it because most of the characters that aren't of status are dressed up like 1950s hustlers of some kind. The more well-off characters are dressed like aristocrats, so I guess even then they remind you of New Capenna characters as well. And other things that don't make a whole lot of sense is like, why would characters from different factions that have polarizing personalities all want to become detectives? That doesn't make much sense. I guess they're trying to figure out who killed who, and like by proxy they call them detectives, but they're like amateur detectives, or I don't think they're all professional detectives by any means. I'd have to read up on the lore. Maybe I'll make a lore video after I'm done with all this and poke a lot of fun into the story of this. Let me know if people would like that idea in the comments below. I've never actually done a lore video for anything in the past, so maybe we'll have some fun, and if that is successful, I'll go back and do my versions of the lore. Shorthand, of course. I imagine the stories are quite lengthy, and I'll cover it, all of it in one video in a humorous fashion. I read something on Reddit that was quite interesting because I post my videos on Reddit. We just talk about some of the stuff that I notice in the sets if people want to. Not everybody on Reddit's an asshole. Lately, I've had actually a lot of great discussions and feedback on here, and I wanted to show you what someone else had said that was quite interesting. This is this guy's interpretation of why it feels like New Capenna. Outside of the arts, the first bullet he says is the 5 mana graveyard shenanigans from Streets of New Capenna have the same play pattern as Mirza Karlov Manor, which I didn't like notice at first, but I see it for sure now. There's a lot of sacrifice themes, like back in New Capenna it was sacrifice a creature called Casualty, and now it's sacrificing a ton of artifacts. The Citizen Tribal that was once green-white is now Detectives Tribal, and they just color shifted it to blue-white. They both introduce a new counter. They go from shield counters to suspect counters. They have the same archetypes of blue-black control and red-green ramp, and both sets promote slower gameplay. That is why this person feels like it feels beyond just an art perspective, all feels the same. It's quite an interesting take. I want to thank Madception for writing this. People don't have to go into this much detail about the things that they say. And when they do, I normally write them off. It's normally just like someone being bitter, but this is actually a good evaluation.
You deserve recognition.
So thanks for that, and you definitely had influence on my mind and changed my perception of the set by a significant margin. What does that mean? It affects people negatively when we had New Capenna come out not even a year ago, and we're already getting basically a reskin, and it doesn't feel that original. And maybe that's why it makes people not as excited for this set. Like I said earlier, I do this updating my knowledge base. I get to stay current on the cards. I get to educate all of you and entertain you at the same time, hopefully. I have a very flat tone of voice. There's not a whole lot of variation in inflection. I just read cards with an impartial mind. I try to be as fair as possible. I'm not trying to put on a show and overhype the sets, and I'm also not trying to be overly critical and just bomb it at the same time. I'm just a middle road kind of guy. That brings us to the end. Hope you all had a great time watching. Take care now. Bye.